doing the best I can. Call the meeting to order for the Assembly meeting on September 22nd. Stand for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Paxton,
Here.
Mr. Eisenbeis,
Present.
Ms. Nelson,
Here.
Mr. Knox,
Here.
Dr. Wien,
Here.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
and Mr. Christensen.
Here.
And Madam Clerk, you're going to make some comments, I think?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We welcome citizen participation and encourage it at our meetings. Before we start, I would like to review guidelines for citizen participation and rules for decorum for the audience. Our office has created a pamphlet outlining guidelines for participation, which I've put on the back table there. If you'd like a copy, it's just a little pamphlet. I'd like to remind folks to please silence your cell phones and electronics during the meeting, and please also refrain from sidebar conversations. If you need to have a conversation with your neighbor, please take that out to the hallway. Please also refrain from commenting, clapping, shouting, or other loud or disruptive behavior. There are a number of opportunities for public comment during our meetings. Persons to be heard at the beginning of the meeting for items off the agenda, routine agenda items such as unfinished business or new business items, or persons to be heard at the end of the meeting for items on or off the agenda. If you wish to speak during any of these times, please come forward after the mayor has asked for public comment. State your first and last name and make your comments for the record. Individual comments are limited to 3 minutes in length. Please remember to be respectful and refrain from using profanity or making personal attacks. Public comment is your opportunity to provide comments to the Assembly. It is not a time for dialogue between the public and the Assembly. Thank you for respecting the process. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Any changes to correspondence or agenda? Okay, ceremonial matters, we're going to have a report from Mr. Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Charles.
I hope it's all right if I take off my, I get a little feedback
It
here,
is.
take off my mask. I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation I think we can throw up on the screen. It's only a handful of slides, but it'll highlight some of the activities since the last time we got together and visited. So again, thank you, Mayor Paxton, Assembly members, and thank you for your support. So my presentation, I'll just go over briefly and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. I have quite a bit more detail that I think the Community Health Council went over last week. I won't repeat that here, but if there are specific questions, I will try my best to answer those. So could I control from here or do you need to?
I think Grant, are you forwarding or moving the slides, or is Chuck?
Yeah, I got it here, yeah.
Okay, so next slide, please. So pursuant to the APA 6.15, Section B, it is my duty and obligation to report before you every 6 months. I think at this point we are on track with regards to all the commitments we've made to the city and borough of Sitka with regards to the integration and merger of Sitka Community Hospital. Through the information I'm presenting today, hopefully it will be insightful and informative. We continue to maintain and actually increase the level of service that is being provided to the community of Sitka. To say these past 6 months have been interesting and a challenge would be a substantial understatement. a lot of our activities have revolved around our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In light of that, we continue to move forward with many initiatives, including increasing access to specialty care here in the community. And we had actually, this right here talks about the slide, there's 53 babies born at MEMC, but actually the number is 97 if you look at the our fiscal year, October to October. So we're quite pleased at the number of young ones joining us here in our community, and I think it's been a great success with that regard. One of the major activities we have undertaken is we have invested some capital resources into your hospital here at Sitka Community Hospital and combined and made an improved and expanded physical therapy program. It is actually quite a lovely space. I imagine some of you had the opportunity to go visit that, but it's been well received by the community, and it's been expanded upon in this last probably 4 months or so, and it continues to grow and offer new and expanded services there. Next page. One of the commitments when we had been discussing this for the prior period of time, which has amounted to several years, it was Search's commitment that we would make investments and continue to improve access to specialty care within the community here. And this is the schedule. I actually have the number of visits, but I am extremely proud to be able to share with you that the access to specialty care has in fact been expanded even through the COVID crisis. And here's our calendar for the upcoming quarters through the end of the year. Cardiology services have been expanded. We're doing a lot of infusion now, which was something that was done at Sitka Community to some degree in the past, but it has expanded. Just one of our fastest growing service lines is the infusion services that we're providing here. Some local oncology and chemo services are being done along with rheumatoid arthritis treatments and other infusion services. We continue to rely on our expanded relationship with the Swedish group in Seattle, but also we are pushing the boundaries with regards to our relationship with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium in expanding services here in Sitka as well. Next slide, please. As I stated just a little bit earlier, one of the big items that we just could not have anticipated was really the amount of effort and response and the resources we've had to apply with regard to our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Hopefully, this is something that many of you have heard about and something that you feel Search is taking the appropriate action in our response. We have been active throughout Southeast Alaska, but specifically here in Sitka. Sitka is really where our primary lab is at. We've been doing a lot of work with regards to, say, the local processing community, the fish processing plants, and the lodges. And it is something that when I talk to my peers, the amount of work that we're putting into it, the number of testing supplies and equipment that we have available is really somewhat unique. This is not something that is available everywhere. We've made a large investment, and I think it's worked on several different levels. Because of our affiliation with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, but also our work through HRSA, our work through the state of Alaska, has really allowed us to take a pretty strong position with regards to the availability of testing supplies. We've entered into agreements with the Indian Health Service with a commitment to provide 60,000 tests between now and the end of the year throughout Southeast Alaska. A lot of those are going to be processed here in Sitka. Some exciting news is this week we received 2 new pieces of equipment. This is something maybe Dr. Ween might be familiar with. We received an M2000 analyzer and an Infinity analyzer, which allows us to ramp up our testing exponentially here in Sitka. While we've had a lot of testing supplies with regards to swabs, and we've had a lot of testing supplies with regards to the Abbott rapid tests. The ability to actually process our standard PCR tests here have been fairly limited. We've been able to do some processing here, but these 2 new machines are really an exponential expansion of our ability to process tests here in Sitka, which will translate into 2 things: faster processing times and less expense. You know, we continue to have to pay when we send tests out primarily to, say, Seattle or to the state lab or to ANTHC, we have to pay a testing fee. And now our testing fee will be mostly a reflection of the cost associated with the application and the reagents or the assays for those machines. We're not completely out of the clear at this time with regards to how those machines will be utilized because, again, the reagents, well, the machines themselves are here, and we do have the reagents to run them. They continue, depending on the testing demand goes up and down. It's a little bit of a cat and mouse getting those. There's a large demand throughout the country and I would imagine throughout the world for the reagents for those specific machines. But it is a substantial step in the right direction. So next page. Amazingly, through all the activities that have gone on with regards to expansion of specialty care and the redesign of some of the services that we've inherited from Sitka Community Hospital, we continue to work on our expansion. One of the largest commitments that we made to this assembly and to the citizens of Sitka was a new hospital expansion here in the community. That commitment remains on track. We are actually in the design phase right now. There are an incredible amount of moving pieces. It is a substantial undertaking. We have budgeted $300 million. There is a preliminary timeline that is on the bottom of this slide. It shows a groundbreaking as early as 2021. I would say that there are already activities that are happening that are really a manifestation of the reality of this. I think maybe at times in our conversations in the past, it may have seemed a little bit of speculative, but in our minds, I don't think it ever has been that, and we continue to stay and be on track with regards to the development of that hospital. It is an incredibly exciting period of time, and I do think it is going to be a reflection, of the needs and the desires of the community. We are hopefully finalizing our RFP to go out for contractors here this fall, and we hope, if all goes well, with regards to the design and the permitting, that we will start construction by this spring. I think that is the last. I have one more slide. Well, it's just regarding the same thing. The next slide, just talking about the magnitude and the importance of this new hospital expansion going on here in Sitka. So, Mr. Mayor, I have more information with regards to some of the particular activities that are going on with regards to our services here in the community of Sitka, and I am available to try to answer any questions that you or any of the Assembly members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clement. Dr. Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Clement, for an interesting update. One thing I do have to say is that as far as the state goes, SEARCH has an incredible capacity for testing, even as compared to places like Providence. And so it's really pretty remarkable that you guys have been able to assemble, I'll say, a testing powerhouse. The other thing that you did forget to mention is you have a new head of the hospital, Ms. Ellsworth, who hails from Swedish as formerly head of strategic planning. And at first glance, she seems to be very knowledgeable and intelligent individual. So that, I'll say, bodes very well. You're asking, do I have a question? And it is. I see all kinds of workmen over at the old White Clinic. So if you could tell us what's going on over there, you would satisfy my curiosity. The Totten building.
The Totten building. Yeah, so the Totten building is, we have it on the schedule for removal, and remediation is being remediated right now. I've been driven by there today, and I just got back into town last night, and it's scheduled to come down. Our anticipation, and we're working with the city actually, replatting those lots, removing lot lines, and it is our expectation that there would be housing going into that site. With regards to our development of the new hospital, one of the commitments we have to make to the Indian Health Service on our end of the bargain is the development of a certain number of housing units for the additional expected employees that will be at the hospital. Our commitment and the IHS's commitment, and while they haven't stated it to the city, but it is always their commitment for any community that they're in, is that it is their expectation that by bringing new employees to town, that we will not negatively impact the housing market in the context of affordable housing for the community members here in Sitka. So it is our commitment to the IHS that we have to provide a certain number of housing that will offset the new employees that we bring to town. And so we're under design of that facility, but while things are in this preliminary phase, we're sort of chipping away at the block in terms of getting the site prepared and remediated and costs offset. As you probably know, that it's an old DOT site, that the building was built in a period where there was asbestos and lead paint in it, so we have going through the hoops to go ahead and remediate that and remove it and get the whole site cleaned and prepped for future construction.
Okay. Thank you.
And just as a comment, and I kind of downplayed it. I don't hold that against me. I shouldn't say downplay. That's a bad thing to say these days. The testing that we're doing at Search, the ability and the capacity of testing that we have, to my knowledge, is unparalleled. Search has an unparalleled amount of testing. When I look at my peers around the state, when I look at what our partners down in Seattle are doing, the amount of resources Search has brought to bear in Southeast Alaska, as far as my knowledge goes, is unparalleled. And the addition of Heidi to the leadership team at Search is a great victory for us. She's hugely experienced, and she really elevates the game here of what we're able to provide with regards to our hospital at Mount Edgecombe.
Valerie?
In listening to the teleconference for Southeast Conference this morning, there was, I think by Robert Venables, a statement made that there's still some land swap necessary to make the plans work in Sitka. Is there still some land questioning or acquisition going on?
So there are, there's feedback coming from this. I'm listening to myself on this as I talk, so I don't know how to turn it off. But there are several land swap deals that have already happened with regards from the IHS to Search, and the primary land where the hospital is going to go has been transferred. There are several deals remaining. One of them, and none of them they're all important. I think as I understand it now, and my expectation is that none of it would stop the ball from moving. One of the big ones is the hospital itself. The physical hospital that exists now is owned by the Indian Health Service. They have a desire to gift that to Search. That has been in process for probably a couple years. And as you can imagine, it's a somewhat burdensome process to go ahead and gift land from the federal government to an organization such as Search. We have bills that have been through the Senate, that have been through committee hearings, that have been introduced in the House, which is sort of a traditional process we've gone through before several times. Things being what they are in DC, it's a little bit, there's some unknown because there just seems to be a more partisanship maybe than there has been in quite some time. And so I think things are moving slower than they historically have. What that does, that would ease our ability, it's not contingent, but it certainly eases our ability to gain financing, commercial financing off the street. You know, as I had stated earlier, our expectation is that this is $300 million that we will be financing through bonding, and having an asset like that on our books definitely helps. I don't see any reason why it's not going to happen, but it's also I think even if it happens at a later date, it's not necessarily an impediment. It just helps make things easier. We also have a land transfer in process with regards to the state of Alaska. And those lands are the lands that contain, say, Penrod Hall, the old motor pool, Millerville, and those are sort of tangential activities that are going on. I think the Penrod Hall, the motor pool, those are projects that I've been working on for probably 6 years off and on. And the reality, a lot of that has to do with that those are basically contaminated sites and they're eyesores, and they're also derelict buildings that have become dangerous for people. I mean, I think if you've gone back to the backside of Penrod Hall, it's all collapsed. They're on the verge of collapse. I think one of the things for me, this was on the radar long before even the hospital was, when you drive onto campus, it's the first thing you see. And it is an eyesore. And I think the tone that we set with our patients, the tone that we set with our employees is when you come to search, you're coming to a place that is reflective of the values of that place. And I think having old derelict buildings be the first impression that you get is less than desirable. There's also some activity around Millerville, which is immensely helpful for the staging of the project. The project is quite large in size. I think Millerville has been used as a staging area in the past for other projects, and that's our expectation for this one as well. So.
Tor.
And then
Oh,
I
sorry,
had
go
one follow-on question from members of the public about now that the year has passed, it seems like there have been quite a few layoffs of the people that were hired from Sitka Community. Is that true or false?
I think there have been 2 layoffs of previous Sitka Community Hospital employees. Maybe 1, but I think it's 2. I don't think none of that was necessarily planned, and there's no additional layoffs planned, but I think that had to do with the combination of just the necessity and the demand and the duplication of those activities would be my assumption.
Yeah, Tor.
Yeah, so it sounds impressive, all the stuff you've got coming on, but one of the things I've been hearing and personally experienced is it seems like once Search took over as the sole provider, prices went up dramatically. A number of people have mentioned it to me, and I know that me personally, that my annual blood test went from $700 to $1,500 overnight. And so I'm wondering what's driving that, and because of that, my next time I'm getting a blood test, it's cheap for me to fly to Seattle, spend the night at a hotel, and come back, and I come out about $300 a head. So, what's driving that, and how do you? You're going to start losing people to Seattle if that continues.
Yeah, I would be shooting in the dark if I tried to speculate on the cost for your particular test. I think I am not aware of any particular price. Well, we do have seasonal price adjustments, and I think those price adjustments in the last 12 months have gone up 10%. And that has largely been driven. I think right now it would be fair to say that in the community of Sitka, our prices are less than the cost of the services we provide on the whole. Not every single line item, but on the whole, our prices are set. We know this because we do cost-based reporting. We have to report for various agencies. We know that our prices, and so the increases are really incremental increases to catch us up to the cost. With regards to any specific items, I would imagine that may have to do, if that service that you had was done at Search and your bill was at one time this, and it was the same service done at Search, and it was now that would be that would be a little bit of a head scratcher. Yeah, and so I think, just some exploration, and I'm happy to sort of line you up with someone offline that could do that, but largely our prices were fairly similar for most items between Mount Edgecombe Hospital and Sitka Community Hospital. I would speculate in your case that it may have to do with how the bill is calculated, right? Itemized or bundled, but I don't know that
And like I
offhand.
said, I mean, I'm using mine as an example because I know the numbers, but I've had a number of people speak to me about this over the last few months, and so it's not,
But I think you are correct that we definitely have to be cognizant of the prices we charge, because it is our expectation that we service this market in a fair and reasonable way, and it isn't the expectation that prices for any particular item would double from one day to the next. So yeah, it's probably less than a satisfactory answer, but that's probably the best one I can give you.
Yeah,
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. Thank you for everything that Surge is doing. I think it's a tremendous blessing, and I know that there's a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes, and I know it was a rough transition, and to be honest with you, I wasn't all that thrilled about it at first, but I think it's turning out to be a good thing. So having said that, I think Tor was just using an example. It wouldn't be, this isn't an accusatory thing, perhaps to combat that question. You could possibly, in the next couple weeks, do a little research into some of these prices, pre and post conversion, and provide that so that the public can know and see why, or if and why, some of these things that could happen. It could be because there sometimes are situations that could have occurred at the exact same time as the merger, but when Tor says that, it does concern me a little bit, but there may be pieces of the puzzle we don't know, so maybe you could do some research at some point and bring that to us. That would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't view it as accusatory in any way. I think these are opportunities to garner feedback, just like the council meetings. We're here, we're taking care of each other in this community, and we want to do it in the most fair and reasonable way. And I could speculate, but it gets down into the weeds on why certain things are the way they are. But I do know I don't think it's the intent that prices, as the example, would double overnight. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me on the surface, but I'm sure there's something behind it. So yeah, no, I don't view it as accusatory at all. I think it's something we need to understand, and because if we don't understand it, we will lose market share to Juneau. We'll lose market share to Seattle, and we need to make sure that that we're in the right on these things.
Okay.
other comments from the assembly? Yes, Steve.
6 years ago, when I was running for this seat on the assembly, I remember a large topic of conversation amongst myself and candidates was, how do we keep Search from moving to Juneau? How do we keep them here in our town? Fortunately, that appears very, very different today. We see Search not only wanting to be a community partner, but heavily investing back into the community. So for that, I say thank you. There is no other $300 million project that I know of going on right now in Sitka that is coming forward. Along with sounds like there's a couple other things possibly in the loop, some housing projects or whatever may come out from that. So it's quite the different conversation today than it was 6 years ago, and that to me is refreshing. To have a large-scale hospital facility in a town this size is not something that many people get to experience. And I believe that is a large factor in the quality of life here and what attracts people to live here. So thank you for that. And do want to thank you for the robust COVID testing. I've had the luxury of traveling outside the state once this year, and we are light years ahead of even large metropolitan areas in not only our testing, but our response here. So I know citizens can always feel that we can do a little bit better, but from my experiences, we are absolutely top-notch here. So thank you for taking this seriously. Thank you for providing free asymptomatic testing to the public, and thank you for your dedication to doing what we can to make COVID a thing of the past here in Sitka.
Other questions or comments? I've got two for you, Mr. Clement. First is, to make Sitka affordable is going to only happen with positive and pretty dramatic economic expansion. So you're clearly a part of that. It's a challenge and it's an opportunity, and we have great respect for that outcome. The second is, please pass on to Dr. Brule his good work in the EOC. He's been a good guy and helped us out. God bless. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, all right. Thank you all very much.
We are now under persons to be heard on any item not on the agenda.
Hi there. Thank you for letting us come tonight. I want to introduce my compatriot, Randy Huey, who is what are you?
Yes,
The
co-executive director.
Co-executive director for the Sitka Community Land Trust.
And this is Michelle Putz, who is the president of the board.
So you probably have seen what's been going on with the Community Land Trust, at least a little bit. So you might have noticed that what we used to call the Old City Shops actually has a house on it. It's a 2-bedroom house. It's now called the Susini Shock Community. And we are happy to say that we've had a happy homeowner in that house since July. We are also excited to tell you guys that we have confirmed buyers for 2 new 3-bedroom houses and are expecting to break ground on them this fall. And we expect those 2 houses to be done hopefully in the spring. We also have 1 more buyer that has applied for a house, so we're getting up to 4 at this point. And I wanted to let you know the price of those houses. So a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 1,100 square foot brand new house with all the appliances in it, $259,000. That equates to a $1,250 payment per month, and that includes the payment and the taxes and all the stuff that goes with it. So that is well under the current rental rates for that kind of a house, and you get a brand new one. Just wanted to let you know that we have 1, 2, and 3-bedroom models to choose from, and we're just really proud that the Community Land Trust is adding to the stock of new homes in an affordable price range in Sitka.
And as you know, the initial affordability has to do with no land cost because the city donated the land and the houses are small. That's it for the initial affordability. The permanent affordability has to do with limiting profit taking at resale. So once the home is built, it remains affordable across all time. So we're building a stock of affordable homes. We also think that building these houses here in Sitka supports the local economy, creates the construction jobs. Now, as Michelle mentioned, the cost of these houses per month to buy is less than their rental value. That was what we considered to be our target. So we're there. They're well less than the rental cost of this. The problem that we now want to work on has to do with down payment assistance because rental costs are high enough. It's really hard for families to save up a 5% down payment. So we intend to work on that. So we'll wrap up by saying we'd love to come before the assembly.
I want to add more.
We're not wrapping up.
I just wanted to remind you guys that land trusts like ours are all over the country working on problems just like ours. Programs like this are necessary. It addresses current problems of a lack of affordable options for homeownership to encourage the continued life and growth of our community. We all know this. This is the problem that we all hear. We can't afford to live here. And so we're adding to that. And I don't know if I'm going to cover something you were going to. Thank you guys for your support over the years. We look forward to continued positive relationships as we create more housing options for Sitka.
That's a great wrap up. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, guys.
But what you do is a small but important part of affordable housing in Sitka, so thank you very much.
And our website, let me just double check, is sitkaclt.org. And if you guys have any questions, you can probably find Randy or I in a phone book or in some other way. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from the public? I think, Sarah, you have somebody that you're going to call. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hi, Deb. It's Sarah calling from the Assembly meeting. We are at persons to be heard, and it's your opportunity to speak. So if you'll state your name for the record, and then I'll start the clock.
Okay, Deb Miller.
You can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Deb Miller. I'm the chairperson for the Tree and Landscape Committee. And on behalf of the Tree and Landscape Committee for the City and Borough of Sitka, I would like to thank Search for their generous donation of beautiful landscaping plants from the site of the old Moore Clinic, which is scheduled for demolition and new construction October 1st. We are a group of volunteers that are devoted to the beautification of our wonderful city and have spent the last 3 Sundays carefully removing the plants. Because of this substantial windfall, the Tree and Landscape Committee will be able to facilitate many spring plantings to enhance the beauty or the natural beauty of Sitka. We would like to acknowledge Dr. Elliot Brohl in particular for his role in spearheading this project to get these plants to the committee, and for his support for our mission to keep Sitka a beautiful place to live. The dollar amount of this donation is hard to calculate, but it is easily over $5,000, probably closer to $8,000. This is by far one of the most generous donations the committee has received to date. So thank you so much, Search and Dr. Brohl. And a quick thank you to Connor Dunlap, City of Sitka Maintenance Specialist, for his help on this project, and Michael Culliver, Building and Ground Supervisor, for his continued support for the Tree and Landscape Committee. So anyway, thank you, Sitka and Search.
Thank you, Deb.
We had closure here? Yeah, thank you, Deb. Other public comment? All right, we are now under consent agenda. May I have a motion, please? Pardon me? Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. For the record, my name is George Paul. I want to thank the city for the assistance with our utilities. It was greatly appreciated. It's a relief. On that note, a couple of other individuals spoke with me as we were talking about this item, and apparently they were denied. In the application process, there had to be some type of standard, and so you had to be in your utilities by a certain date and time, and they didn't meet it. But I would request that you will waive that if there's a utility, a family that has utilities in Sitka. I think that should be the standard, not the date that they initiated their account with the city. Because people that have a home, that's a plus currently, because of the lack of finances and jobs and that. It's rough trying to stay in the place you have. So I would ask that the city waive a start date for utilities, and all those that are in need of assistance for their utilities, please cover that. That was the positive of those things. The negative thing, we have been basically okay in the city for quite a long time. I appreciate all of you that allowed me to call you and speak to you privately, but I don't think that our government should be run over the internet and that. So what I'm leading up to is the individual that is too afraid to sit here in the room with us and confer with the constituents. There's an election coming up. There are 8 people running. If the person doesn't want to be in the room with us because they're too afraid, I think he should resign and allow 3 people to be elected that will sit in the room and listen to their constituents. All right, thank you, that's it. 50 seconds left. I'm learning, but I'm leaving. Bye.
Thank you, George. Thank you. We are now back to the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item A, approve the standard marijuana cultivation facility license renewal applications for Darren H. Phillips, DBA Fiber Light at 120 Jarvis Street, Unit C.
Second.
Public comment? Once, twice. Back to the assembly? Yeah, Dr. Wayne.
I don't know, in reviewing this, normally it's pretty much, just a pass-through, but I noticed there are like 10 pages that say notice of violation. And I read what was called an explanation, but I would really like to hear an explanation. This is, I think, the first time we've kind of had an application like this, and I understand some of what is said, but actually not all. So I would require an explanation.
I can provide an explanation. So our office receives this paperwork from AMCO, these types of applications on a regular basis. And when I saw this, I contacted AMCO because I assumed, rightfully so, there may be questions from the assembly, so I was just trying to inquire for more information. The response I received was that tax payments are confidential through the Department of Revenue. So AMCO, they were unable to tell me if it had been resolved or not. And I did speak with Brian, our attorney, about that. And Brian, do you have any other comments that you would like to make?
We did speak about it, Sarah, and I think our responsibility, the other assembly's responsibility, is to approve the application based on whether or not we have any issues in our municipality, and not whether or not some other governmental entity has issues. It's not our responsibility to have any discretion on whether or not we want to, let's say, disapprove of their application. I think Sarah was just being transparent and open to make sure that the assembly knew all the information that she had from other governmental entities and not asking anybody to act on that information. Thank you.
I guess I don't necessarily have a problem if they've got a disagreement with the state, as long as they're good with us. I just want to say it still seems kind of strange and I guess cool that we have this in front of us at all. At this, when you read the motion, the idea that, okay, we're going to approve a marijuana growing facility still strikes me as a little different, but I don't have a problem with it.
I think we're approving the renewal of it, and in the past, this assembly approved renewals when somebody that sat at this table was delinquent on those accounts, was pointed out to the city that was violating the conditional use permit. So I'm not afraid to vote on this, and if he's delinquent in his city sales tax, then we should, not forward it on for approval. But I don't see anything in here. I see his explanation of August 20th as to why he's delinquent, and I can accept that. Thanks.
Brian, if an entity like this was in default with their state taxes, the state does remit a portion of that to the municipality. So therefore, you could assume that they would be delinquent in remittal to the municipality. Does that change our position on our approval of this?
And I don't know which particular tax we're talking about here.
Part of the excise tax does come back to the municipality on, or not the excise tax, actually the permitting fee. So I stand corrected, and we'll pull back my last comment. Thank you.
Sorry, I started off the question of that I was unsure of it. I ultimately have no problem with approving this. But I guess I'm old-fashioned, and if somebody is making an application and there might be some potential question, it would be nice if they were here so they can explain themselves. And so, it's kind of like, well, he's on a state warrant, but we're not looking for him, so that makes it okay. And I find that a little convoluted logic here. I'm sorry. But I really would like to, just have the courtesy of an explanation, which I think the Assembly is entitled to since we are hearing this. But like I said, I have no problem passing it, but I can't because I just have, I feel a deep enough question that at least I am going to vote no, if for no other reason than on the principle of it, so.
And I can't see all the way in the back, but I don't know if Mr. Phillips is here this evening. I don't think so.
I have a question for Sarah or for Brian. Just as a similarity between us approving or not approving these kinds of licenses, like the alcohol beverage licenses and other things like that, aren't we kind of hemmed in a way that unless we have specific objection to the business operations because they are in arrears on sales tax or property tax or something else like that, we don't really have a lot of leeway for objecting to a license being approved? Or is that, am I understanding something wrong?
I don't know, not sure I understand the comment or the question, but I think the responsibility of this body is to, from the perspective of our municipality, to tell the state whether or not we approve. That doesn't mean that they're going to approve it or disapprove it. It's just our portion of the pie that we're telling them about.
Right. So to get, I guess, at my question then, if this entity doesn't have, if we don't have any objection to them because they already, they're current on their sales tax, they're current on their property tax, they're current on everything owed and obligated to the municipality, isn't it, from this particular table, we're going to say we don't have any objection, or we don't have any real reason to object to this, and then this moves on to the state board, and then the state board would take care of these other objections, the penalties or other things that.
That's correct, Kevin. The staff at AMCO did notify me and say that the renewal application that we're considering tonight will be considered by the Marijuana Control Board on October 28th and 29th. So this is one step in their process for approval. And they'll bring they present all of the notices of violation over the past 12 months to the board with the renewal application.
And even if we objected to it, it would still go in front of that board.
Correct. Okay, on the motion to approve this, the standard marijuana license or standard marijuana cultivation facility license renewal application for Darren Phillips, DBA Fiber Flight at 120 Jarvis Street, Unit C. Mayor Paxton? Yes. Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbaz?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
No.
And Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-1 on item A.
Now under Board of Commission committee appointments, item B, may I have a motion, please?
I move to appoint.
Wendy Alderson to an unexpired term on the Planning Commission.
Second.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the Assembly. Assembly comment?
I've worked with Wendy a fair amount, and I think she'll do a really nice job, and
Great.
thank you for doing it.
Yep, thank you. Call for the vote, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve Ms. Alderson to an unexpired term on the Planning Commission, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Eisenbeis.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item B.
May I have a motion on item C, please?
I move to appoint Vaughn Morrison to a 2-year term on the Gary Paxton Industrial Park Board of Directors.
Second.
I could add for the public, Mr. Eastad, he withdrew his application, so on the agenda, you'll see that there's 2 potential applicants, but there is only one, and that's Mr. Morrison.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Dr. Wayne.
Well, I've had the opportunity to see Mr. Morrison work, and I think he would be a good continued individual for GPIP, and so it's a good thing.
Concur. Comments? Call for the vote, please.
On the motion to appoint Von Morrison to a 2-year term on the GPIP board, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
and Mayor Paxton.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item C.
We are now at item D. May I have a motion, please?
I nominate Gary Owens, Samuel Pointer Jr., and Wayne Young to serve on the Police and Fire Commission.
1 spot.
I thought, do we nominate all 3? And yeah,
Then
then,
we
Oh.
discussion.
Yeah,
and
so you'll
then,
nominate all 3,
I wasn't
and we'll have
100% sure
discussion,
myself.
and then I'll call.
Okay.
Public comment? Yes, please.
Second.
Thank you, Valerie.
And I need to disclose before public. I need to disclose before public comment that my sister, Leslie Young is the mother of Wayne Young, which makes him my nephew. If you think it makes me have a conflict, I will step down, but if I vote to appoint him, I wouldn't be getting any kickbacks or payment or anything.
As we are disclosing, sorry, Mayor, to interrupt you. Wayne Young is a firefighter with me at the fire department. This is actually the first time I've seen his application, and we haven't talked about it in the past. So,
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly. I'm Charles Dean, a resident of Sitka, and I came to advocate for the application of Mr. Oines for the Police and Fire Commission open position. I've known Mr. Oines for a while, and he and his lovely wife, Coke, have raised fine sons in our fine town. And more on point, though, I would recommend him for a couple of reasons. Understanding and in view of the fact that this position is a staff advisory function to the Assembly, there was so much furor raised about it before that I do feel that there's some reason to perhaps go in depth into why I would support Mr. Oines. And first of all, he has served his country. He was a combat infantryman in Vietnam, and as a veteran myself, that commends him to me, and I hope that it commends him to you and to our community. And additionally, he has had some interesting work experience in life, broad. Most of you folks know that he was, for a time, I believe, the maintenance supervisor at one of our facilities on Catley Ann Street, one of the commercial facilities. But if memory serves, going back, I believe at one time he was actually the owner and operator of a newspaper. So there's a bit of a spread there. He is a fair and reasonable man, a man of faith, and I believe he would bring some calm probity to discussion of issues presented at that table. And if there is a commission right now who might be under the microscope, it's perhaps that one. And I believe Mr. Oines would be a reasonable voice in those deliberations. And in conclusion, let me say that I believe Mr. Oines, as am I, is a law and order conservative. And I would perhaps define that by just reversing the sequence there and saying that we must have order in order for our laws to operate optimally. And I believe that he holds that position. I would also say that I do not know the other 2 gentlemen who are applying for this position, but they have my respect and my appreciation for applying. I understand there's a dearth of application for these positions, and they are to be commended. And with that, thank you very much for your attention and for your service, all of you.
Thank you, sir. Other comments from the public? Once, twice. Okay, back to the assembly. Yeah, Dr. Wayne.
I'll lead it off. For those who play chess, this is what's called a zugzwang.
What?
And a zugzwang, as my teacher would say, look it up. But I'll tell you what it is, you don't have to. It is a move that you're forced into, which you know that will not be the best move for you. And that happens frequently in chess. You know, it's someone moves and then you have to move and you're put into a disadvantaged position. And the reason why I think this is a zugzwang is that all three applicants, if there were three positions, would have 3 votes. And so I feel it personally, since I know each of them in different degrees, and it's just hard for me to make, I'll say, that chess move. And it took a lot of thinking, and I just hope as I move my bishop that it will be accepted for the other 2 individuals. I just have a feeling this may go for a couple of rounds, but again, I would like to echo Mr. Dean's thing and thank everybody for applying. I'm astounded and gratified that this position would garner such talent for coming forward. So thank you. And ZUGSWANG. So, okay.
Tor.
Yeah, in some ways I want to echo what Dr. Wayne was saying. As I read through this over the weekend, I was like, it's pretty, I mean, I would easily see any of these people on the commission. And I don't know who I'm going to vote for now. And so it's a little bit unusual, but I think we have 2 people here, 2 of the people here, on all 3. I'd love to hear a minute or 2 from each of them just saying why they want to do it and what they think they'll bring, if the rest of the body thinks that would be useful. Because, like I say, right now, I don't know how I'm going to vote.
Yeah, that'd be.
Sure.
And if I may, I did speak to Mr. Oines. I have not spoken with my nephew Wayne Young or Mr. Painter.
Yeah, but if they're here, I think it'd be useful. Please. We have one candidate here?
All 3 of them.
All 3? Please.
Gary, how about Gary, could you come forward?
Thank you, Sarah. Okay.
Acceptable to remove the mask, correct? Okay. You have my statement, I think, each of you in front of you, so you know that I've had, over the years, an interest in law enforcement. So I won't repeat what's in that statement. What I will say, however, is that I've been concerned, I think, as we all have in recent years, about the controversy in our country regarding criminal justice and racial justice and things of that nature. And we've had some horrible cases of injustice in our land. It's been horrifying. I must say that looting is not an acceptable form of expression, in my view. I think law must be enforced fairly, compassionately. And so when the topic of defunding the police becomes an item for discussion, it drew me into the decision to run for this position. I'm not the slightest bit interested in defunding police. So that's my story. It's an honor to be considered, whether I'm selected or not. I appreciate the opportunity. I thank you all for your service. and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir.
Are we asking questions about this, or?
What's the will of the assembly? Okay, that's fine.
I have
Yeah,
one then.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Thank you for taking the time to answer our questions. You speak of the police department, but that's only half of the police and fire commission. Near and dear to my heart is the fire side. Do you have anything to say about the fire department and potential, that half of the commission's job?
I regard the fire department as equally valuable. I would say, however, that the controversy that's raging is not about supporting the fire department as much as it is supporting police. So you can be sure that the fire department would have my full support. I don't know exactly what that looks like because I haven't looked into that side of municipal function to the degree that I have law enforcement.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Pointer.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the Assembly, my friends. I thought long and hard about if I was asked tonight to make a statement. I appreciate those who have put me on the level of the other two candidates. I think they're both great men. In the short time I've been here in Sitka, I've gotten to know both of them as well. And I've gotten to know a lot about Sitka. I've fallen in love with Sitka. In November last year, I purchased a home in Sitka. And I have a great deal of respect for the fire department and the police department. I also have a great respect for the people that they serve. And that's what motivated me to apply. The young people that play on the playground down by the Science Center, as well as the people in our long-term care in our Pioneer Home, as well as, from my standpoint, the veterans in Sitka. And I would like to be given the opportunity to be a voice for them on this commission and to continue to show my love and appreciation for this town that I washed up on the shores of about almost 6 years ago. Questions?
Questions? Yes, Steve.
And thank you for taking our questions as well. I know we're kind of putting you on the spot this evening for that. In your letter attached to your application, you state that your core beliefs concerning public safety and welfare parallel those charged with the task of providing these services. Could you explain that sentence a little bit more?
In my home, I have a niece, well, not my niece in my home, but we share the love and prayers for my niece. I'm from the city of St. Louis, if those of you who don't know, the baseball capital of the world. But, and my niece is a police officer. My cousin, my sister is a former sheriff, and I worked briefly for a little security company called the United States Marine Corps. So, and Eve, which some of you may know, her husband, he was a firefighter, and he was also a veteran, and he passed away. So Veterans Day, 9/11, or even if we hear sirens in the neighborhood, just bear close to our heart. And like I say, the place we decided to be home for the rest of our life. So.
Do you know that Mr. Eisenbeis is a fellow Marine?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I know he's a jarhead.
He's a good guy, yeah. Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Any
you.
other comments? Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.
Just remember the Marines are part of the Navy.
Okay, Mr. Young.
They provide excellent taxi service.
And big guns.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Assembly. Is it okay if I take my mask off? Well, I'll start off with saying my name is Wayne Young. I have lived in Sitka for 20 years, and I've gone on vacations, but I've mainly lived in Sitka. I have had the opportunity to volunteer and help out at the Sitka Fire Department, and love every minute of it. It's great. All the people there are fantastic. And I thought about applying because in the description it says you look out for public safety, and we would advise you guys on any public safety matters. So I thought that'd be, something I could help out with, being a member of Sitka and living here my whole life. And then to speak to the police side of things, I actually got also the luxury of going on a ride-along for my first time less than a month ago, but I thought that was pretty cool. I got to learn about the police side of things, where they would lock me up if I ever got in trouble, and I thought that was pretty interesting, and I learned a lot. And if I was a selected candidate, if I was, I feel like I would help out quite a bit and try and do my part here and make it all happen.
All right. Thank you for your volunteer service. Questions from the assembly? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Okay, so is there any other questions?
Let's see what happens.
I don't have any questions, but I think we should be able to comment.
If you can, yeah,
Yep.
for sure.
And if it's okay, I'll go first. The last time we voted on putting somebody on this committee, I got some pretty hateful emails. I've been called a virus. I've been called disgusting. The people that wrote and said they supported my vote at the last meeting, I don't think they would send the other assembly members the kind of emails that have been sent to me. With that said, I probably am going to vote for my nephew, and I will probably get more hateful emails, but that is what it is. I support him, and I think that he would be a good addition to the Police and Fire Commission. I serve as liaison there. I know the people that are on there currently, and I think Wayne could work well with them. Thank you.
Right? Yes, Steve.
In this instance, I see a great opportunity to bring in a up-and-coming young person into to further public service to hopefully try and keep that young person in Sitka. Young people are leaving this town, and perhaps that's because they're not as involved as they could be. So we have an opportunity here to get someone involved on multiple levels, which I believe is fairly exciting. It sounds as if Mr. Young was extremely excited about his ride-along. Who knows? We might have a future police officer on our hands. We'll have a talk about that. He needs to be a firefighter first. But Brian, I did have a question for you on conflict of interest. If Mr. Young was appointed, could he serve in a advisory role on the Police and Fire Commission while also being a volunteer at the Sitka Fire Department?
I believe he could.
Okay, thank you.
We've had it in the past.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have to say that I think I know who I'm going to vote for, at least initially. But boy, the three candidates didn't make it any easier. They're all three were impressive. But I think I'm going to, right now, I'm leaning towards Mr. Young, all puns intended, partially because he's young. That we have a kind of a diversity of ages. I mean, people of different ages look at things differently, and I think that it would be valuable to have somebody from I'm not sure if he was born this century or not, but soon close to it, that it makes me feel old, and I've yet to go on a call with him, but I think it would be a valuable addition to have somebody like that who's grew up here and can become more invested in the community, like Stephen said.
Other comments from the assembly? Okay, Sarah.
Okay, so I will call for your votes in a random order. The applicant receiving 4 votes will be appointed. Mr. Knox,
Young.
Mr. Christensen, Mayor Paxton,
Young.
Dr. Ween,
Mr. Oynes.
Ms. Nelson,
Wayne Young.
Mr. Mosier,
Wayne Young.
and Mr. Eisenbeis.
Young.
Okay, Mr. Young,
We can't overstate what 3 great candidates you all were, and your contributions to our wonderful town is big league. Thank you.
Absolutely.
By the way, I'm a Cincinnati fan. Okay. All right, thank you. Great.
And we do have 2 terms expiring next fall.
Unfinished business, we have none. Under new business, may I have a motion? Well, do we need a break? Yeah, I think we do. Let's take a-
is always yes.
The answer is always. There is no old business, unfinished business. Under new business, item E, may I have a motion, please?
A discussion, isn't it?
Pardon me?
Oh, wait, maybe I'm wrong. Oh, E, sorry.
I move to approve ordinance 2020-49 on first reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2021 using COVID-19 funds for harbor restrooms.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Dr. Wayne?
Well, as always, though this seems very simple on the surface, would it be possible to ask for just a 3-sentence discussion as to how the monies are going to be switched around so people can hear it and understand why?
Yeah, while Melissa's walking up, I'll just get the big message out is that DEC more or less just dropped this grant on us early on in the stages of COVID and said, here you have $367,000. Here's how you can spend it. Let us know if you can't. And it's an extension of CPET funds in some way, shape, or form. So we kind of have the same rules there. Initially, in my discussions with them, I said we can't buy $367,000 worth of hand sanitizer to put at the cruise ship dock because it had to be for COVID mitigation efforts. And I reminded them that we don't have our own cruise ship dock facility. But I did discuss the harbors and how the visitors tend to hit the harbors and the public restrooms a lot and mainly their first stop when they get off of the cruise ships and as we're shuttling people. So the proposal seemed to work, and we've got, I think, 3 years to spend the funds that they gave us. So I've talked enough. I'll let Melissa explain how we're moving the money around.
So briefly, we had an existing appropriation for upgrading the Crescent Harbor restrooms. We're adding on about $18,000 of expense and using grant funds to offset a good portion of that. So we're reducing the working capital from the general fund, the harbor fund, and the CPET fund, which we're all going in to fund that project. So ultimately, that capital appropriation is increasing by 18, but the money from the city, from the harbor fund, CPET fund, and general fund is decreasing. We also added updates for the Lake and Lincoln restrooms, which is also funded by the general fund, and then all of the harbor fund restrooms. So that appropriation will live in the harbor fund.
Can I ask a follow-up question? And this could be for either administrator or the chief financial officer. And that is, you were making these upgrades. I know a lot of it might be no-touch items, but what else do you have plans for the restrooms to improve them at the tune of 367 gold faucets?
Good evening, Stan Elias, and Harbor Master. So, if you, the restrooms at the airport, similar to that, just all the urinals, we're gonna upgrade those, which is gonna require a lot of plumbing, in a sense. Your typical fixtures, your hand dryers, we're gonna probably eliminate that and just go to dispenser towels. That's been requested. And that's the gist of it. No gold-plated sinks or anything like that. I guarantee you that. I'm just looking for longevity here, so it'll last 50 years.
Well, thank you.
I have one, just not for Stan. I'm seeing if anyone else had questions for Stan before. John, on this, does any of this money provide for maintenance and operations? You say we have 3 years to spend it. I'm just concerned that we're going to build really, really nice restrooms that then we can't clean. If we're going to use paper towels that we won't be able to restock the paper towels, or we'll lock them down in the off season so that they're not available. So does any of this alleviate any of those concerns?
So as I said in the beginning, with this being COVID mitigation efforts, I would have to pitch the maintenance and operations plan. We are not spending the entire $367,000 under this plan. There's going to be a balance remaining. But I can't say with certainty that we can fund any maintenance and operations until I can make a case that it would be for COVID mitigation efforts and directly benefiting the cruise ship passengers.
So cleaning, I think, could be pretty easy, cleaning and sanitizing.
Right.
That's fairly important in our restrooms. But this wouldn't, for instance, the bathrooms in the grass strip here at Crescent Harbor, would those in the past have been locked during the winter, but we're not going to provide for any extra hours on those with any of this money?
That has not been an item we've discussed, so I couldn't answer your question now.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Bob, go ahead.
I would note that I use the harbor system quite a lot. Not that we have a boat in the city harbor, we more out of the cove, but we frequently go down there to see other people. And I check my mother's mail at one of the harbors, and I've seen so much more cleaning and activity in those restrooms. So I would venture to guess that our expenses from March on are mainly COVID related, and hopefully we could do like an accounting adjustment, and maybe that's what this is.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with this, although I'm not sure, it seems like this project's about 275, if I'm reading this correctly. And I'm wondering if, I know we were planning on doing some work on the float, the cruise ship float at Crescent earlier, and we decided not to. And it has to do with the flow of the passengers and keeping them safe, both security and also if we can dedicate any of that other money towards that project, since it would also seem to fit the bill for this. Because I think that was about 30,000 as I recall, give or take, and there's about 80,000 left here.
The best answer I can give is that we'll have to ask. I mean, I guess the worst we can be told is no. To probably overgeneralize it is it kind of has the same rules as CPET funding, just a little more restrictive because imagine CPET funding and now it has to be COVID-related CPET funding. It's just some more hoops to jump through.
It took me a minute to remember what Tor was talking about, but if that is an acceptable use, I would support that. There's some small life safety issues on the float that do need to be fixed, and it directly benefits lightering boats. So, thank you.
Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-49 on first reading, Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 7-0. That's first reading, item E.
Item F, may I have a motion, please?
I move to approve ordinance 2020-50 on first reading and amending Title 11 Vehicles and Traffic of the Sitka General Code by adding Chapter 11.80 Permanent Motor Vehicle and Trailer Registration.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Yeah, Dr. Ween.
A couple of things I actually didn't understand from this, and that it seems to be, it's certainly not vehicles retained for 8 years, but actually those that are 8 years old. And so it seems to be promoting older vehicles. And I'll just make the notion that older vehicles may not have the modern pollution controls that other ones have. So I don't know whether it's retained for 8 years or just if your vehicle that you bought yesterday was more than 8 years, that you can keep it. Other things were there are trailers that are mentioned, and I'm unclear, and I apologize to the sponsors about whether boat trailers and everything else are included in that, and I'd like the definition of these types of items. The other thing is, right now, we do receive a portion of the registration fee, which comes to the city. And as always, I enjoy irony, because this would, in essence, be taking things off the tax rolls, and yet the sponsors in the past, those two voted to remove seniors, wanted the seniors to be taxed. So to me, that's an irony and kind of a discrepancy. So the questions that I have are about the vehicles, the trailers. You don't have to answer about the irony, but I was wondering if some of the sponsors can explain this in a little greater detail. And it's mentioned that a request has been submitted to Alaska DOT for data to put together estimates on revenue loss to the CBS. So by the statement of the memo, we have no fiscal note, and so therefore, by definition, it's incomplete.
Yes, thank you for pointing out what the voters have shown me was my biggest mistake while sitting on the assembly, and that was voting to remove the senior sales tax exemption. I see how that is thoroughly relevant to this conversation. On the other side of that, I've also voted to remove boats as personal property from the tax rolls. So a little bit of both ways there. To me, this ordinance allows the city to ease the burden on its citizens without losing a whole lot of revenue. The 2/3 of this revenue does go to the state, while only 1/3 of it comes to the municipality. It's also about ease. When people don't have to go into the DMV frequently to renew their motor vehicle registration, it becomes a lot easier for the citizens. Trailers, there is a definition in the ordinance. I don't know what you're looking at that needs more definition. Happy to talk to you offline about that, though.
But we're talking to citizens now. Some of the questions I asked are for that.
No, I'm answering your questions right now.
So, define boat trailer.
Under line 66 is where there are some, where it starts for trailers and goes on for that. So
I didn't understand it. I apologize.
Okay. Let's see. Kevin, do you have anything else you want to cover on this one?
No, I think you covered most of any of the unorganized municipalities and boroughs in the state already get this exemption. And it's up to organized boroughs and municipalities to adopt the code language in order to get the exemption or the right to apply for a ZTAB or the permanent registration. And you know, we're going to be a part of a small handful that have taken advantage of the state law that allows us to do this. Like Stephen pointed out, it's not likely going to be a very large budget or a revenue change for us. We are still waiting for the numbers. We've reached out to the state to try to get all those numbers. It is only for non-commercial vehicles and trailers. So commercial vehicles, trailers, buses, trucks, all that kind of stuff would still be a part of the state registration system, and that's not something we can do anything about. It just has to do with how the state has things organized. So this is, allowing for us to ease a little bit of fee burden, I guess, from the state, and then also provide some convenience, because we all know how, in particular right now, how difficult it is to go into the DMV and get something registered. To answer the question about the age of the vehicles, this is vehicles age 8 years old or older. So as vehicles age, they will become eligible for this. If it transfers ownership, and a lot of this is outlined in the memo, but if it transfers ownership, that new owner would then have to reapply for that Z-tab and pay the state fee. There is a small state fee to get that permanent registration. So that portion, there will be a small portion from those permanent registration fees that would end up coming back to the city. So, there is some registration fee that will still come back, but then there's also some that we will lose in revenue. So we're working on getting those numbers. We just haven't been able to get the full details from the state yet.
So, I understand what the sponsors are doing, and I think that's a noble thing. I just was wondering, and I'm not trying to be, hostile or anything. It did seem premature to put this on there before you had the data. I was wondering if you two would consider pulling that until you got the data from the state.
Well, we do have one other reading, so we can put this forward and then wait until we have the next reading, and we should have that. I'm hopeful that we'll have that data then. The other thing about the data, or the number, the revenue loss number, it's not going to be a hard and fast number. It's not going to be, if you enact this, this is what your number will look like. It will depend on how many people actually apply for the exemption or the permanent registration, and then how many times vehicles turn over within that too. So it's going to change.
Can you give a rough fiscal note? Just a rough.
I can.
10,000, 50,000, 100,000? Choose one.
No, it's far less than 100. I mean, our total from the memo in fiscal year 18, which was one of the larger years that we received the revenue share from the state, we got $92,790. That is all the revenue sharing from all registration fees. So you can assume from that, there's, it's only for, again, residential vehicles and non-commercial trailers. So only a small portion of that 92,000 would be what we would have lost.
Yeah, so I was doing some back of the napkin math on this. So in the United States, the average age of vehicles is 13 years. And so it might be a little bit more here, a little bit less, who knows, but if in FY20 with $76,000, and since it's only a third, you're probably looking, I'd say, again, ballpark, probably around 20,000. And as earlier, and it was pretty obvious to me, that it very clearly says that boat trailers count, which for me, what struck me about this is one of the things that's easy to kind of forget at the table is what a pain in the neck it is to go down to DMV or City Hall or anything. And that's hard. It's one of the things that, because we're surrounded by it all the time, it doesn't seem like that big a deal to ask somebody to go down to City Hall or DMV. And it is. And especially where I think I would definitely take advantage of this is boat trailers, because anybody who has a boat trailer knows the only time you notice that that the tags are out is when you actually use it and you kind of go, oh, that's right. So being able to get a permanent boat trailer it would be really nice. So I don't think you're going to see a huge difference in the amount that we're getting, but you are going to see, to make people's lives in Sitka a little easier, which is, we don't get that many chances to do that. We generally don't. So I would really, I'm going to vote for this because, say at least on first reading, if we can try and get some more numbers out of the state, but just again, knowing the average age of vehicles and things, and I believe the registration goes down as the vehicles get older anyway, so your majority of your dollars are going to be in the newer vehicles. So I don't think that this is going to be a substantial loss, and it will make people's lives easier.
Dr. Wayne.
I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, but for registering, either you're talking about transfer of registering, and then you have to go down to DMV. But if you're just every 2-year renewal, you just do it online, and it's easy breezy. So I keep hearing what a pain it is to go down to the DMV. I've enjoyed every one of my visits. You should go to a DMV in New Jersey if you really want to go postal.
I can second that.
But the important thing is, unless you're talking about something completely different, such as the standard renewal every 2 years, you don't have to go down to the DMV to do that. I am very happy not to pay this because all of my vehicles and boat trailers will, comply. So that's not the issue. But hey, thank you guys.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, Valerie.
You know, I may be able to vote for this on first reading, because it seems like anytime we have anything that's up for first reading and it gets notified in the paper, then you have people that are interested or concerned. And I have mixed feelings about it, because when people turn 65, they get a P for permanent, if they choose to do that. I worry that this might encourage a lot more of the derelict black vehicles, like on the last turn by the ferry terminal, that is now kind of becoming a hazard because people have smashed out the windows, and people are just going to start, getting their free registration, and you're not going to be able to figure out who owns the thing when they leave it out there and how long. That one's been out there for probably 8 months, and I talked to the administrator about it. He said the state doesn't have the money to deal with it. We don't have the money to deal with it. So I would be concerned about, encouraging people to have more of those sitting around. You look at the Cove parking lot, tons of them there. I don't know it's not the people that own the Cove that own the lot. I think it may belong to the tribe, and there have been bad incidents of theft and whatnot from people that are camping out in those derelict vehicles. So I have mixed feelings about this. Thanks.
Other comments? Yeah, Steve.
Thank you for pointing that out, Valerie. It's not something that I had thought too far into, but it's a good, refreshing perspective. The only thing that I can say to that is that the vehicles are still registered, and anytime that ownership is transferred, it does require a re-registration, just as you have to do right now. So my understanding is a database of ownership would still be available. However, as I'm assuming with the junked vehicle out the road, if someone sells it and does not go in and complete the transfer of ownership form, then we tend not to know who owns the vehicle. So registration will still be there. However, it's simply a one-time fee as opposed to a reoccurring fee.
Just one more time on relation to that. It might also discouraging passing on vehicles and not re-registering them. And so it could develop into a different type of market when you have a single lifetime registration, and it's up to you. For example, you take my car, technically, it'll be an interesting thing, so.
Well, but that's still illegal, so it's not something.
So's abandoning your car.
Let's call for the vote. Call for the vote, Sarah, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2020-50 on first reading, Mr. Mosier?
No.
Dr. Ween?
No.
Ms. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
And Mayor Paxton?
Yes, we go to second reading, but I was good for five. I'd probably vote no.
Okay, so it does pass 4-3 on first reading.
To go to second reading, right? Okay, we're now at item G. May I have a motion, please?
Actually, there isn't a motion to be made. This is a discussion direction decision item for the
Right,
city
thank you.
seal project.
Yes, you're right.
So
Amy.
Amy does have some information to pass out to us.
Right, come forward.
While she was getting all set up, she asked if I could just start the conversation on this. So you'll see some seal redesigns that are presented to us tonight. My understanding of the process tonight and Amy, correct me if I say anything wrong. We're just going to go over them, just see if we can come to a consensus on which one should be going forward at this point. Happy to answer any other questions that might come up through the process. Amy is definitely the resident expert on this and has not only all the knowledge, but has put in countless time into it to make this project successful. So I do thank her for the time that she has put into this to make a seal that is more inclusive of all of the members of our community. So with that, I'll hand it over to Amy, and she can go over a few things that she has tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenbeis. For everyone tonight, just a reminder of where we're at in the process. When we last met earlier in September, or actually, I think that was late August was the last time. Yep, late August when we last discussed the city seal. The direction from the Assembly at that time was to come back with the top 5 entries from the contest. And there was some feedback from the Assembly as well as from our boards and commissions, from public comment, from the tribe as well. And we relayed all of that information to the artists, and we gave them an opportunity to make some of those adjustments and then resubmit their entries. So what you're seeing before you tonight and what was included in your packets are the results of that feedback. Some of the artists chose not to make any revisions, and so their entry stood as the original that they submitted. Others did take some comments back and provided some updated entries with new revisions on them. So what we're hoping for tonight is to be able to come to consensus on what entry the Assembly would like to move forward, and then we can prepare a resolution for the October 13th meeting, at which point it would be adopted. And now I can share my screen, I believe. So I can also display some larger images if
Can
you
I
would
pop
like.
in a question?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
absolutely.
So, thank you for doing this. This really helps. So, I noticed that a lot of these, like on the business cards and the stationery, you've got each seal with and without color. Generally, and I should know this, but I don't. When you're handing out, when you do the business cards for these people, whoever hands them out, and on the stationery, do you generally do them with or without color?
Currently, a lot of our printed materials do have color, but it's not necessarily the full filled in color, it's the blue outline of our seal. It just sort of depends. I think a lot of electronic media tends to have color, and sometimes for print we'll do black and white.
I was just wondering, what the standard was, what the chances are that most people will be looking at.
Yeah, our seal currently is a little bit difficult because it doesn't have very high resolution. So for the full color, we generally don't do that on a lot of printed media. We do the blue outline version.
Thank you.
Are we back to general discussion or for Amy?
Were you going to give us?
I can, yep, I can
Yeah.
walk through just so we can all have a reminder of the entries. This is entry number 4. Entry number 5. And there were, this was one where there were some comments taken back about potentially doing a different color scheme that might have been a little bit more muted, so that was provided to us as an option. The profile of the helicopter was adjusted on this entry by the artist as well. Entry number 6, the colors were altered a little bit, and there was a little more sharpening for the image provided. Entry number 10, I believe, is unchanged. And then we were provided with a little bit more of, kind of more of a line art version, especially on this black and white, for entry number 12.
Could you show me the first one again?
Sure.
Oh, number 4.
Yes, and these, and just to clarify as well, these were the top 5 based on our public comment, based on our board and commission feedback, and then also just based on the assembly discussion as well, what you guys indicated were your preferences as well. So it was fairly easy to narrow down to 5 based on our public comment
Okay, yeah.
I'd like to say thank you because actually printing in these formats really helps solidify my view of the various choices, and some of them are well suited. And you can really see the difference as opposed to this, but when you see them on here, it is much clearer as to how it will be viewed in business. And so, thank you. This was, we'll
I believe
say,
that was Mr. Mosier's idea. That was a very good suggestion, and
Forget-
as soon as
no,
I
no,
did it.
Forget it. Amy, thank you. It was a stroke of genius, okay? If you want to, go ahead.
I agree, it's really helpful to have them in person and the
Yeah.
scale of what they're going to be used. It's a lot easier to evaluate.
I'll just start comments because I think everybody's, on number, looks like 5, the number 5 and 12 are very popular. I didn't like 5 last time because it looked like some sort of thing like you'd see on a Visit Sitka. They obviously changed the wording, which I like. It's more official looking, it's not rounded. I can't decide whether I like the color or not. Like, it pops, but then it's like, is it popping too much? I do like it. I'm kind of between, my opinion is between number 5 and 12. I'd like to hear what other people think.
Can you show me 12 again, please? Thank you.
I appreciated the boards and commissions coming in on this, and they obviously, it looks like 5 was a little more popular, but not a lot. But I will tell you that I did some informal polling, and it kind of surprised me. But 5 was, when I just showed it to friends of mine, that 5 overwhelmingly was what people said, oh, we like that. And I think it might be because of the color. But for what it's worth, I mean, I actually liked a lot of these, but I think right now at least we're kind of leaning towards 5.
Yeah, number 5 definitely has a lot of community support behind it. Personal favorites, I really liked number 10 as a seal, kind of due to the simplicity of it. To me, a seal should be kind of simple, but number 5 has overwhelming support. So for me, at this point, a discussion of number 5 and do we like the bright, bold sunset, or do we like the typical gray, hazy Sitka day? I don't know. They both look pretty good on a business card, and I think that's the more important one because it's harder, it's smaller, it's harder to see. The sunset colored one is very bright. It definitely is. There's part of me that's drawn to the muted tones of the other. So should we go forward in that direction, I would like to hear what people think about the 2 color combos as well.
I prefer number 5 and the muted color versus the really bright one. I liked number, was it the one with the fireweed was number 10? 12. But the heron or kingfisher or whatever, it should be like, I think, a bald eagle. And so 5 muted colors is my favorite.
I agree with Valerie, I like bald, but the important thing to note is my choices for this, and it's how they look on the stationery and so forth, is 6 and 12. And I think if you look at them in card form and so forth, in their context, I think those really are nicely designed and stand out to me. So 6 or 12. And to me, a seal should be worn or eaten, or both. So there you have it.
And my preference was 5 and 6. In that, I really like 5 just because it's so crisp and the lines are sharp, and I think it's easy for, you know, reproduction at the black and white level, it's very easy because it has that that crisp, sharp edge to it. And then I like the colors. I think the bright sunset would look really neat on a flag, but on stationery, it does pop a little bit too much, maybe. But yeah, I'm open to hearing the further discussion. I liked 6 in that it did have a really nice look too, even in a low resolution production, like on a business card or something like that, something that was printed smaller. I thought it was a really interesting representation, and it's very realistic in its representation too. That's the classic look from this National Historical Park beach looking back over town. So I really like that.
I think the 5-colored one is commemoration of Porky's prank.
I made a comment. Which 5 that? My vote is number 5 on the right side. Dollar.
Mike?
Stay on. The one on the right, Amy, with the dollar colors is my pick. So
I go along with that.
Yeah, I like that.
I think my preference was the more muted colors. I think the bright colors is what kind of distracted me from this one at first. So yeah, muted tones it would be my preference on this one.
Yep, I
do we have a consensus on these then? Yeah, that's true. Do we have a consensus then?
Yep. I won't be here.
Okay. Well, we have at least 5.
It's actually going to be an unfinished business item on October 13th.
Then.
So you will be here.
Okay.
Now that you put it that way.
All right. Do you have everything you need, Amy? I believe so. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, thank you for the work on this one.
We're now on item H, resolution.
I move to approve Resolution 2020-27 on first and final reading, declaring an economic disaster in the city and borough of Sitka due to COVID-19 and poor regional returns of all salmon species.
Thanks.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Yes, Steve.
John, I have nothing disagreeable in this, but what are we hoping to gain by declaring this disaster resolution?
So thank you for the question. First thing is we're publicly recognizing that we've got the emergency in both our tourism sector and our fishing sector. Fortunately, the Southeast Conference started this morning, and one of the first speakers we had, and Mayor, I'm not sure if you were on there for that portion or not, but Ben Stevens, the governor's chief of staff, brought this issue up, and we had just got to hear a short presentation from him. Essentially, 4 communities have done this already, and we're just joining forces with them to send a message loud and clear up through the state that our fishing industry has been hurt substantially, not only by COVID, but from poor returns this year. And I don't think I need to give any detail on the loss of tourism here. So the idea is that hopefully FEMA will step up at some point, maybe DEC, and eventually we get some federal attention on this through our delegation, who we'll be hearing from tomorrow morning at the Southeast Conference. And we've just raised our hand and said, yes, we're hurting and need the assistance.
Okay, so nothing's on the books yet, but we're just joining voices to become a louder voice.
That's correct.
Also
Thank
a
you.
testimonial to our fishermen that we understand it wasn't just COVID, it's the price of the fish, the size of the fish, the markets. I mean, it's been the perfect storm in terms of really harming our, yeah, Valerie, please.
They did talk about that during Southeast Conference today, during the economic reality of what's happening. And because of COVID and restaurants not being open, they're not buying fish. Several Southeast communities have already declared this. I believe the city of Ketchikan, I'm not sure about the borough, I think Wrangell did. Juneau has or is in the process of. So I think it's just something that's necessary to do in order to hope that the federal government will give us more assistance. Thank you.
Dr. Queen.
There's a saying that says, make your needs known. Somebody might be listening. And I think that our resolution speaks to this. Clearly, this has been problematic economically for the city, and I really think it needs to be announced loudly that this is the fact, because at the end of the day, I think everybody might want to wish that they had resolutions like this. And I do have to say, the silence is deafening. Even though they may be working in the background, I really haven't seen big headlines with our legislative group or too much with the congressional folks, but there is a little bit of an election here. But I don't like the silence. I think there needs to be drums beaten here because if you just read the resolution, you get the sense that this is a problem. If you read the state papers, it's a problem. If you read the national papers, it's an economic problem. And I thank you for bringing this forward, Mr. Leach.
Dr. Ween, actually, about 2 weeks ago, I emailed the delegation with that very issue. The silence is deafening. Thank you.
So I would echo pretty much what everybody said and add one thing that is also, it doesn't need to be on here, probably shouldn't be, but that has also contributed to this, and that's our current trade tensions with China. And I know that the federal government did provide a little bit of money to help with that already, but I think that by doing this, I think we actually may receive a little bit nicer reception for this if in the other communities as it moves up the chains to the feds, because I'm aware they're quite cognizant of the fact that like a lot of kind of agricultural businesses, that they're being hurt by that. And so and I know that there's been some funds released to help deal with that. So.
Let's call for the vote, Sarah, please.
Okay, on the motion to approve Resolution 20-27 on first and final reading, Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Knox?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 on item H.
May I have a motion on item I, please?
I move to approve the hire offer for Craig Warren as Fire Chief as recommended by the municipal administrator.
Second. So
Public
at least I'll
comment?
be able to get to tell them that.
Back to the assembly. Yes, Dr. Ween.
When I first heard they were going out of Sitka to look for the fire chief, I was, scratching my head a little bit because there are a number of qualified people right within our own department. And I was actually very, very happy to see that Greg Warren stepped up to do this. I think that it's important because he's been around a long time. He knows the system, he knows the players, and so the transition is not even noticeable. And even more so, I think he knows the shoe size of our current chief, because those he will have to fill. And so he already knows what he is truly up against. And a new chief would be, I'll say, clueless as to exactly what performance standards he would be up to. So I would like to say thank you, Craig Warren, for stepping up. It's much appreciated. And I have to say, I do remember when his children were very tiny. So it's been a long time, and congratulations. I hope this is something that you will enjoy. The only thing is that, do I have to call you Chief, or can I still call you Craig?
Gary, before we get too much further into this, just want to disclose that I am a volunteer at the fire department, as if we haven't heard that enough here recently. But if anyone believes that to be a conflict, but I don't Craig has not offered me any money to vote for him, nor will I receive any money if he is chief, so.
The challenge that Craig has, he's gonna get a pay cut and work harder. So other than that, it's a good deal. No, we're lucky to have Craig apply for this. Other comments from Assembly? Yeah.
So I know I'm going to pay for this because Craig, actually, I started the fire department a few years after he did, and I've probably worked with him as much or more than anybody else down there. And as much as I almost hate to admit this, he's a pretty close friend. And when this opened up, my initial reaction was I really hope Craig goes for this. And I was very disappointed when he didn't initially. And I will just tell you that when John told me, hey, we have a applicant, we have somebody we're gonna offer the job to, and I went, oh, okay, who? And he said, Craig. I just went, yes, finally. So I enthusiastically support this, and like I said, I will be paying for that soon, but I'm gonna do it now.
Good. Let's call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve the hire offer for Craig Warren as fire chief, Mr. Knox?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mayor Paxton?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Dr. Ween?
Yes.
Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 7-0 on item I.
Well, Chief Miller, God bless you and thank you for all you've done for this great town of ours. And Craig, I know you'll do as well. And we thank both of you for your good service. Okay, let's have a motion on
Craig, tag, you're it.
J. Okay, you bet, you bet. Thank you, Chief. Item J, please. We're on item J, is the discussion, direction on the municipal administrator's annual recommended transfer to the public infrastructure sinking fund. Do you or Melissa want to explain this, John?
I can try to explain it, and I can give you the very
choice.
generalized, simplified version of it, but if
Simplified
Melissa
version
would
would be
like to come
fine.
up and
We
help.
don't have any money to transfer. We don't
That's pretty
transfer.
much it, is we don't
Yeah.
have any money left
Right.
to transfer.
Yes, I think that while our financial position is not dire right now, and we actually ended the year with a higher fund balance than we ended the prior year, there's so many unknowns, and we're expecting, so many things to happen yet this year, that's really the reason that John is recommending no transfer to the public infrastructure sinking fund. I also, one of the things I noted, and one of the things that we keep an eye on, kind of just watching kind of the direction of where our finances are going, is looking at our unassigned fund balance. And that, this year is smaller. That's largely because we had to do the hospital payment. We advanced that. It'll be paid back, but right now, kind of our free and clear funds are less than they were last year.
Right. Comments from the Assembly? Yeah, Dr. Wayne.
Now, the sinking fund was used for infrastructure, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And we have an enormous backlog of infrastructure. And so I think that this really speaks to what we are facing. And it is not a small commentary that in the past we would have hundreds of thousands of dollars and then we'd argue about moving the money here or there or what it was needed at the time. But now we're dealing with zero. And I think that that speaks volumes. And when you say that we had a little more in the general fund at the end of the year, you're talking about the, I'll say, the fiscal year. And therefore, it is not necessarily fully related to the damage that has been created. So it's not a full analysis of where we really stand. So I certainly agree, zero from zero is zero. And so there's no arguing with that. But to me, it is a real message. And I see some future assembly members sitting in the audience, and I think this is the kind of thing that has to be taken note of because of all the financial demands that are made on the city. And we really have to begin to focus on how we spend this money.
There's no doubt the cost of infrastructure and the cost of city government are gonna be a major conflict in the next year or two. And so we're gonna have to deal with it, and we're gonna have to deal with it in a rational way. Should I be elected, I intended to do so. But
I
other comment
move-
from the assembly?
I move to transfer $0 based on the recommendation of the municipal administrator.
Second.
Public comment? Back to the assembly. Call for the vote.
Okay, on the motion to transfer $0 based on the recommendation of the municipal administrator, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Dr. Ween,
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Knox,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
and Mayor Paxton. The motion passes 7-0, and that's on item J.
And now item K, and never done in the past, we're gonna have the administrator give on the, what's wrong with my mic today? On the CARES working group, and then we'll have public comment after he finishes, so, John, you're on the.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Assembly members. This is the part where I have to do a whole lot of talking. I'm not going to do what I did last time and go over the necessary ways that we can spend CARES funding in the 16 categories. I think I've beat that up enough. But I do want to give you, and I sent you the email earlier today just to give you a heads up on what I'll be discussing tonight. I want to give you a kind of a snapshot of where we are in each one of the categories, the funds remaining in each of the categories, and the projected funds remaining in the categories that are not fully spent yet, and start to drive towards some sort of plan on what to do with those remaining funds. But before I start that, I do want to express to you and to the public, we've been receiving, a fair share of waiver requests and exemptions and those sort of things for I missed the deadline for the utilities or I didn't fully qualify. And although we are all very sensitive to those concerns, as with any program, there have to be some rules to that program. Otherwise, we just make this a subjective type program and we would be evaluating every single application. And then if we get to the point where we start granting exemptions and wavering from the rules, then there are the people that we've denied on some of these applications that we may have to go back and reevaluate. But more importantly, if we can close out one of the programs and say it's done and move on, then we can take that balance and move it to a different category and move forward with a different program. So I just, please keep that as a reminder when we go through the approvals and appeals process for Category 2 as well. So in Category 1, I think I showed you this chart last time, $4.5 million. We committed just over 2.7 million. And I'll say we have just under 1.8 million remaining from that category. That was open until July 31st. We pretty much used the entire month of August to address the appeals, and I'd like to close that one out and move those funds somewhere else, hopefully towards another round of business and nonprofit grants.
Can I stop just for a second? He's not going to toot his own horn here. But if you look at the staff to administer that program was just under $6,000. Tell me you can do a program that puts out that kind of thing, does that much work for $6,000. Somebody worked hard. So I just think they need some kudos there for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. In Category 2, mine didn't print out correctly, so I got to get another piece of paper here. We still hope to be mailing checks out by the end of the month. We might get a good chunk of them out next week. But the numbers right now, 661 total applications for a total dollar request amount of $3,095,000, an average request amount of $4,675. Commercial fishing makes up 249 applications. Actually, I'll just read the percentages here. 37.7% of the applications. Tourism, 10.3% of the applications. Nonprofits, 6.8%. Retail, 4.5%. Restaurant and food service, 3.9%. Rentals, 6.8%. And all other, which are really your, those are your smaller grants, the sole proprietorship type businesses, and a lot of deckhands, independent contractors are in that category. That makes up 30%. By dollar category, 53.9% of the applications are in the $2,500 range, 20.6% are in the $5,000 range, 10.9% at $7,500, and 14.7% at $10,000. We're still working through, there's about 30 applications where the grant analyst is still emailing and having phone calls back and forth with the applicants to work out some of the final clerical issues in the applications before they come to Melissa and I. There are approximately, we're expecting anyway, about 25 or so who check that box that they'd like to speak to the assembly directly concerning the grant amount and why they feel they are due for a higher amount than they had qualified for. So we'll be working to get those scheduled on an assembly agenda in as efficient a manner as possible. That said, I expect to have about $3 million spent in this category, and I'm recommending we do another set of business and nonprofit grants, and we'll talk about that at our Thursday meeting, so I don't want to go too far into it. But I would like to express that time is of the interest here. Right now, we're nearing the end of September, finishing up with the first round of grants. We need to move quickly to get an application out for round 2. If we are lucky enough to get that on the streets by October 1st and give people 30 days to apply for the program like we did in this first one, that takes us into November. It'll take a couple weeks to analyze those applications and then move the money. We'll be lucky to get that round of funding out by the end of November, nearing Thanksgiving, and then we're going into December where we've got a month left for the businesses to spend those funds per the guidelines. So time is of the essence here. So the CARES Working Group has been feverishly attacking this, and I'm going to send it actually to you tonight. I meant to do it this afternoon. The draft applications, we weren't able to get it in the assembly packet today. The agenda item is there, but I'm going to email those draft applications and FAQs to you tonight, and I really hope you take the time to look over those tomorrow and Thursday. And hopefully on Thursday, you can give me some recommendations on how to fix or change that application, and we'll move forward and try to get that out on October 1st. And we'd also like that night to hear a recommended budget for that program. Did you have a question?
No, I'd just make a comment. It seems like it took less time to get the utilities subsidies out, so maybe instead of doing business and nonprofit grants thing, because there is so much paperwork involved, that we do another round of the utility grants, but we'll discuss that Thursday, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would like to address that one. And this is more for covering ourselves and for audit purposes. For the utilities and harbors grants, we more or less wrote a memo to ourselves stating that it was a reasonable expectation that the amount of funds that were granted through these utilities and harbors credits would be enough to carry through. They were from the pandemic, and they were a reasonable amount to carry them through till December. We needed to be very careful that if we gave too many credits that would carry us past the deadline for this, it would start to raise those flags that it's looking like revenue replacement, which is not something that was the intent of the program at all. So I'm not saying it's off the table. We just needed to be very careful about that one for consideration.
And I would just point out that for a residential household, that may have only carried them through 3 months with the $1,000, because a lot of people are paying over $400 a month, but, you know, that includes garbage, water, sewer.
Right.
And I think realistically, we're going to be lucky if we see cruise ships next year, according to what I'm hearing from people in the industry and seeing, you know, what's happening with the airlines. Thanks.
So if there's no more questions on Category 2 status, I'll move on to the other ones. If I overlooked sending out contracts to all of you, because I said I was going to do that as well, that's just because they are buried in my inbox somewhere and I missed it, so please call me if you haven't seen one. But moving on to Category 3, the new city funded programs that we budgeted $2.5 million. The child care program, the subrecipient agreement with AEYC, the THREAD program, that subrecipient agreement has been fully executed, and they are managing that program now as of very recently. We've left $100,000 on the table in that program in case we need to extend it for another month or so, so that is available. Food security, I've already given this update, $200,000 subrecipient agreement fully executed with Sitka Tribe, and they're managing that program for us. Behavioral mental health program, $300,000 allocated. A portion of that, which I won't know until after it's used, but we extended the EAP benefits to Sitka School District employees, and we'll see that in our billing. That is a city program, and we might see a small bump up there. But we had 5 respondents to the RFI that I put out for those services. Neurobehavioral consultants, a $66,000 contract was sent out, but it is not yet signed. I expect to see that one back soon. Jeannie J, $10,000 contract has sent out but not signed. Same thing with Debbie Terry. SCAPS, we have a contract that's kind of split into 2 different portions. $10,000 for the treatment, and then $5,000 for a marketing and advertising. Basically, they're going to drive anybody in town that needs those services to the proper resources. And I've given them a list of everybody else that we have on contract for those services. And then Dr. Crippen, $10,000, again, contract sent, but we have not received a signed copy back yet. Housing support. $500,000 subrecipient agreement is signed with the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, and that is for mortgage and rental relief. We've discussed that one before. The RFI that was out for about 2 weeks for $250,000 allocated for homeless support, I had no respondents to that RFI. So that money is available. I'm still open to ideas for support. But yeah, we didn't get any responses to that one. And we could use that to extend further the mortgage and rental relief program if necessary. The Transitional Employment Program, signed the contract with Sitka Conservation Society. I don't have the list of projects in front of me, but contract is available if anybody needs to see it. Do you have a question, Doc?
I do have a question about it. Thank you for sharing the contracts with me. And, you know, on the surface, they seemed okay, but there was one thing that kind of stuck out in my mind with that particular contract. And if you look at it, it's what are the fees that would be paid for employees? And it's $40.25 per hour for work by crew members, $57.25 per hour performed by crew member employees. I guess it just says crew members, and $86.25 per hour for project management and technical staff. Now, the interesting thing is I have all these binders filled with things, and the first one I grabbed was the City and Borough of Sitka, and it was the FY19 staffing table. And the administrator gets $62.50 an hour in 2019. And The new chief, and this is from 2019, will only be getting $48.52 per hour. So that means the new fire chief is getting just above a crew member for this thing. And I don't understand how this, was configured. And when you also look at the, I think it's wow. And so I'm speechless. So please explain.
I can't explain it. I had to do some homework on that one as well. That is not the wage that they will get paid under this program. That was for our budgeting and billing purposes. So it actually protects us a little bit more. In the initial proposal, there was a amount proposed to be paid to each position, and it was going to be billed with the full number of hours. So we pitched back more or less saying those are not to exceed amounts, and under our proposal, under our contract, it prevents them from being able to, I would say, bill the hourly times to the higher waged employee under their program. So we're going to see actual hours and actual positions, and they have a not to exceed rate.
It sounds interesting, but what is it called? The Parada rule or something? If it ain't said, it ain't in the, it doesn't count in a written contract. So if there are all these between the line things, I apologize, but I can only deal with what I read. And so that's the way it looks to me. And when I look over what staff at City Hall gets, I think that it's interesting. So.
Am I correct in assuming that the $40 an hour also includes their workman's comp and other such non-wage items?
That's correct.
And so, and of course, the administration running it. So, but I mean, that's why we all know that somebody who makes $25 an hour, it costs a lot more than $25 an hour to keep them employed.
Okay, so the minimum wage should be $40.25 because of all the costs? And not a good defense, but I understand what you're saying, Mr. Leach, but it's still kind of a wow. So thank you, though.
In talking with Andrew, I've talked with Andrew quite a bit about this program, and one of his main concerns and one of his commitments to it as well was not to outprice current jobs in Sitka too. He didn't want to create something that was going to strip people out of other positions that they were already working in. He really wanted this to truly be something that benefited people and benefited him best he could to employ underemployed or unemployed people because of COVID. But he didn't want to he didn't want to go into competition with all the other jobs in town either. He was very sensitive to that.
Let's go.
The remaining $450,000 in the transitional employment program was allocated for city projects and city work. Right now, we have 9 employees that have been hired and are working on the slew of projects that we had listed as examples, mainly working with Parks and Recs and Public Works. And recently, we've expanded that to get some clerical assistance. I know that we needed some scanning work done, and understand that not everybody is going to be able to work outside. So we're working to hire a few more people there. I don't have a dollar figure yet. The first payroll goes out this Friday, so we'll have an estimate after that. As far as city impact and mitigation spending, we're working through that one, but it's been very small thus far. We had $1 million budgeted. We've committed just under $160,000, mainly towards IT, the mitigation efforts and sanitation and extra cleaning. Sitka School District, the $430,000 subrecipient agreement was signed, and that is active. We have a work session scheduled with them for the 24th. I believe that's about next year's budget. But there could be a possible request for additional CARES funding, but I have not received. I recently heard word that they were not going to request more funding, but then I heard in a Alaska Municipal League conference last week that there's a new program, that there might be another additional subsidy for children available, or for school children. So we'll see there.
John Holt called me yesterday and said it was about next year's budget.
Okay. And then category 6 is our contingency budget. I know everybody likes to grab at that one, but as we've all seen, our budget's going to be tough next year. So anything that we can relate to COVID, or any COVID work that we're doing, I'd like this category for our employees to capture their time that they spend on COVID efforts, so we can use some of these funds to cover that. And also, I put this note in here, talked about it last time, FEMA assistance has started to trail off significantly, and there's been a lot of push for the communities to use their CARES funding for some of the COVID response efforts. So that's where we are on our budget right now, and I'm open to any further questions if you have them.
Well, yes, Dr. Wayne.
It seems that there's a lot of money left over, and hopefully there will be some good thoughts on how to spend it. One of the things that I don't see enough of is structural items that could benefit the city in the long run, as far as those expenses. In the first round, it kind of indicated where people were in the numbers and how many people applied. And I think that we do need to consider structural items within the city, which will eventually or potentially come up as far as what we might need in the future. Example, in licensing for example, long-term care facilities, CMS is coming up with a whole new slew of rules as to how you're going to deal with patients. And I think that we need to be forward-looking in thinking what structural items the city would benefit from, and we may be, in essence, responsible for, because the stimulus funding cannot keep coming. And I think that there's going to be a piper that will have to be paid. And so I think there are good uses for this. And the CDC does recommend good HVAC and HEPA filters.
I guess my priority would be that you take this 3 million plus or minus available and use it, and I know you've been working on this, but it's targeted to businesses and nonprofits in a way of sustainability of those ones that are the most critical to our community. And I mean, I know you're working on that, but I think there's a lot of basic businesses and nonprofits in town that need some extra money to be sustainable. So that's my,
Mr. Mayor?
yeah.
Steve,
Let's go with Kevin first.
Well, just wanted to mention, being part of the working group, and to be in all fairness, John is doing the lion's share. John and his staff are doing the lion's share. But everyone is contributing a lot. My opinion, and I guess we can talk about this more later, but I would prefer if we did a second round of targeted grants to businesses and nonprofits as well. I think that we had a really good meeting today, and we don't have the perfect, this is never going to be perfect, it's not going to make everyone whole, but I think we're coming up with something that's fair and helpful for both businesses and nonprofits.
Yeah, Stephen.
John, on category 4, city impact mitigation spending, we've only spent a very small chunk of that. Do you anticipate any problems spending all that money by the end of the year, or do we need to start looking at reallocation of some of that funds?
I don't see any problem at all with spending that money. We've got a pretty strong strategy together. I'll look over at Melissa too, but we've got a plan for both reimbursement and things that we can, what I used to call in my past life, strategic buys at the end of the fiscal year and have them ready to go. But I don't see any problem.
Small tools and other, understood, thank you.
Other comments from the Assembly? Other comments, Assembly? Okay, we're ready for public comments concerning the CARES Working Group. Is there anybody from the public who wants to? Yes, George.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. For the record, my name is George Paul. As I stated earlier about the utilities, I want to paraphrase through the process what I heard, and it's probably going to take me longer than 3 minutes, so you're going to hear it ding. When it came to recommending the utilities and paying the utilities, what I heard was an approval for residents and Sitka citizens. If you need help with your utilities, apply to the city, and the money's there. It'll pay your utilities, which, thank you, it did for my residents. However, what I didn't hear was the fine print as to start dates or other limitators to it. So in advertising to people, you know, if you're, I mean, when I came here in November and was fighting the utilities increase, before the pandemic, there were discussions about, do I pay my utilities? Do I pay my rent? Do I buy food? Which one comes first? So there are people before the pandemic that were struggling to get by. What I'm hearing now is there's a lot of money still available. My recommendation is for that person, the one that's on the street, the little guy, myself, in Sitka, not a business owner, not any of those other categories, just a person that lives here in Sitka that has a residence that needs assistance with their utilities, then take care of those first before we cover the other categories. That's basically what, you know, recommending. I don't know, you know, I didn't see any of the fine print. I didn't read any of the fine print. That's just through the process, what I heard, what the money's available, watching what's going on around the rest of the country and how they're using their monies. It seems like, yes, there are strict rules, but there are ways to address them. Like when you all did the emergency motion to give your administrator authority to do what needed to be done during this time, and we'll deal with it at a later date and brush off the dust of it. So that is my request or recommendation, is to cover all the utilities for all those that need assistance with their utilities. Thank you. And actually, I did it under 3 minutes.
Okay, with 9 seconds to spend, George, you're good. Good. Okay. Thank you. Other comments concerning the CARES issue? Okay, we are now under persons to be heard on items on or off the agenda. Yes, Dr. Wayne.
If no one from the audience wishes to speak, I would like to. And the reason I'm going to mention this tonight is because the Congressional Budget Office did release their 2020 long-term budget outlook for the United States. And it is quite distressing as we pile up debt. For example, in 2007, an important number is debt as a percent of gross domestic product. And in 2007, it was 35%. In 2012, it was 70%. In 2019, it was 79%. And it is predicted that within the next year or so, it'll be 106% of debt of our gross domestic product. And that means we're talking about debt, and so we're talking about that we're going to outrun our revenues. And so I think this is very important to deal with and understand as we move forward in our own personal finances, to realize that we're going to have to do a little fending for ourselves. Of the two major things that are going to really be hitting us with curves which have a very high slope are health care and net interest on the debt that we are accumulating. I hope you realize that when the Fed prints this money, what they do with it in order to make the ledger work is that they sell debt. And this is going to be a problem. Believe it or not, Social Security over time is a little more level, as is discretionary spending and mandatory spending. And one of the funny things that you like to look at is if we take debt and our revenue, which is debt as a percent of our Sitka domestic product, it's actually, it is also, will give you pause when you look at that. And so these are cautionary tales. This is the Congressional Budget Office, which has some, which is pretty straightforward. So just keep these things in mind as the city moves forward, and understand that there is a much larger picture which will affect us. You can see it in the state because as the state financial issues hit us, Sitka got less. And we see it in the fact that they didn't give us the money for the haul out. And I think that these kind of things will metastasize in our ability to potentially get funds. So keep this all in the back of your mind, and thank you for your kind attention.
Other persons to be heard? Okay, we're now at reports. And I go first. How fast 2 years go. I just want to thank the public for all the good they've done in this incredible town that we all love, for staff for their good work the last 2 years, and for my fellow assembly members, who I think you've all brought wisdom and thoughtfulness and good work to the assembly. Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. I said it earlier, Southeast Conference started this week. Today was the first day. We heard Southeast Alaska by the numbers, a good economic snapshot presentation. It's a very large slide deck, but I'm happy to share that if anybody would like to see it, and I can just post the website that it's available. We'll be hearing from the delegation tomorrow morning, and I'll be listening in on that one. As Dr. Wien already stated, and I believe the news is already out, it's been in the paper a couple times, but we did not get awarded any build grant on September 15th. We'll still be waiting for PIDP grants, but we were only able to apply for the Marine Services Center for the PIDP grant since the haul out did not qualify. And that's all I have.
Mr. Attorney?
No report tonight, thank you.
Liaison reps? Yes, Dr. Wayne.
There wouldn't be a meeting if I didn't speak about liaison. The basic notion, you actually heard a lot of it from Mr. Clement, but they did have the Sitka hospital, the Sitka hospital community type meeting. And in general, these meetings are just kind of what is going on. Initially, when I went there, I had the concept that we were going to be dealing with lots of quality assurance issues and be having down-to-earth conversations, since 3 of the meetings were actually confidential and, in essence, in executive. But it was more of informational, and so it was the same thing for this meeting. And I can only say that it was interesting to hear how they are approaching things, and to me the highlight was actually being introduced to the new hospital administrator. In the old days, when a new person would come to town at the hospital, we'd get a nice big article about them and who they were and where they came from, and same thing with new docs and surgeons, and I kind of miss that in learning about them, but it is what it is, and that's about all there was. It was, again, informational. I see Fred Olson out there, who also sits on that committee, and so that's my report.
Bex?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I got a couple. The investment committee met, and I guess, the main thing is a report from the firm that handles the money. And basically, if I say it, is not as good as we'd like, but nowhere near as bad as it could have been. We took a dip, but in recent time, we seem to be actually doing quite well, but not enough yet to really to get everything back yet. But it looks, all the signs are that it will, and they seemed, with their mix of, because we're forced to be a bit more conservative, which is a good thing, they're pretty confident we're going to be able to grow the permanent fund and our other investments more than we're pulling from it, but not a whole lot more, is basically what it comes down to. The GPIP meeting, which was immediately, not quite, I had to go from one meeting to the other pretty much simultaneously, was, and the news about the not getting the grant was, of course, the main topic. And essentially, we're kind of back to square one, but there was a lot of support for doing a carefully worded RFP again, or maybe a little bit more of a phased-in approach or something, but kind of looking for ideas at this juncture, because unfortunately we don't know if the people who put forth the other plans are willing to come forward again and such in the current environment. Was also interesting that the dock out there is getting very busy. We had multiple requests for expanded service there, and it looks like that's going to be a pretty steady economic driver for the city, if nothing else. That dock is proving to be a real valuable asset. But there was not a whole lot of smiling going around the room because we had just found out about the grant.
That's bad. Other comments?
Are we under other?
Not yet.
Okay. I have a comment on financial, if I could.
Clerk?
Kevin,
I'm sorry, Kevin. Pardon me, I'm sorry.
Port and Harbors met a couple weeks back, just after our last meeting, actually. Stan reported that Crescent Harbor is fully, quote unquote, plugged in, ready to go. So there are some older boats that are having to do some wiring changes in their boats because of some updates to the plugins there on the docks, but that was all required by code and national safety standards. So everybody's working through those issues there. They're also in the process of removing a lot of derelict boats, but also seeing a number of derelict vehicles, as somebody pointed out earlier tonight, in the parking lots, and that's something that they're going to try to start dealing with once the multi-service officer is all trained up and ready to go, and start yellow tagging cars and trying to get some old cars out of the parking lots in the harbor system. The next meeting next month is going to include some further discussion about a launch ramp, and then also past due accounts that are outstanding within the harbor system, and trying to deal with some of that. So.
Other liaison reports?
Under other.
Okay, Madam Clerk, yeah, please.
All right, as with every municipal election, the following voting options are available. The municipal election is Tuesday, October 6th, so the voting options available to qualified voters in Sitka is to receive, you can vote by mail, so you can apply with our office to receive a ballot by mail. We need to receive those requests by September 29th in our office. Another voting option is to vote in person here at Harrigan Hall. We started yesterday. We've had quite a crowd. That runs through October 5th, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. You can vote by fax. You can have a personal representative pick up a ballot for you and bring that to you. And then you can vote in person, of course, on Election Day here at Harrigan Hall. I wanted to clarify that the advanced absentee ballots aren't counted until Wednesday morning. Will begin October 7th. And then also there's been some confusion. If you applied to receive a by-mail ballot for the general election, that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't mean that you're going to receive a by-mail ballot for the city election. They're two separate elections, and you would, if you want to vote for by mail in the municipal election, you need to apply separately for that. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Other.
I just wanted to make one comment about the investment committee. One of the things that is said multiple times, and I hear it in a number of places, is we're just following the assembly rules, you know, what their guidelines are. And I'm trying to think, okay, when was the last time the assembly actually set the guidelines? But the important thing is, as for newcomers and for the people who sit here, is that they are running under the notion that you are actually setting these financial guidelines. So please open up a Samuelson and start to do some homework. One of the things that was mentioned at the last meeting was in order to keep our draw, the amount of money we pull out of it, there was kind of a hint of a recommendation of switching from U.S. intermittent government bonds, which we have 30%, to U.S. intermittent government cash, and 30%. And if I'm saying something incorrect, Melissa can tell me. But the important thing is that with U.S. government intermediate credit, you're talking about a lower level bond like triple Bs and so forth. And so the basic notion is that if you get a higher return, you're going to be taking greater risk. And so the Assembly really needs to keep touching base, not only through liaison, but to have those people talk to us a little more in understanding how this permanent fund is being invested. And so keep your eye on the sea in front of you and your hand on the tiller, and hopefully things will be okay. But remember, higher returns, greater risk, so be careful. Thank you.
Noted. Come a motion for adjournment? All in favor, say aye. Aye.